Ever feel like stepping out onto the internet, it's kind of like, wandering into the Wild West. Like one wrong move and you're getting tangled up with the wrong crowd.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to be caught off guard out there.
Exactly. And that's where our deep dive comes in today. We're tackling Cybersecurity 360, from fundamentals to artificial intelligence. Think of it as like our trusty guidebook to navigating this digital frontier.
And the best part is, this book doesn't expect you to already be some kind of, tech whiz.
Right, like they don't make you feel bad if you don't know all the lingo.
Exactly. It's all about making cybersecurity understandable and accessible for everyone, which, let's be real, it needs to be these days. It's not really optional anymore.
Seriously. I mean, there's that quote from the book that really stuck with me. There are only two types of companies, those that have been hacked and those that will be. Kind of chilling, right?
Yeah, that one definitely makes you stop and think. And it really highlights how cybersecurity isn't a one-and-done kind of deal. It's constantly evolving.
So it's like an ongoing arms race.
Pretty much. Just like technology is always changing, so are the ways people try to exploit it.
And speaking of those ways, the book dives into common threats.
Hmm?
And let's just say it made me want to double-check all my passwords.
It's eye-opening for sure.
Mhm.
They cover everything from malware, which is basically any kind of software designed to, well, mess with you, like stealing your info or just wrecking your devices.
Oh, the worst.
Yeah. They also get into phishing, those sneaky emails or messages that try to trick you into giving up sensitive stuff.
Oh, tell me about it. It feels like those phishing scams are getting sneakier every day.
They definitely are. It's getting harder and harder to spot them. And of course, there are things like denial of service attacks, basically, where hackers try to overload a website or network to shut it down.
Oh, right, like when a website crashes and you can't get it to load.
Exactly. Think of it like a stampede of people all trying to cram through a single doorway at once. It causes total chaos and stops anyone from actually getting through.
Makes sense. And I guess those insider threats they talk about are kind of like someone leaving the door propped open from the inside.
That's a good way to put it. It's basically when the risk comes from within an organization, like an employee accidentally clicking a bad link.
Okay, just hearing about all this makes me feel a little vulnerable, honestly.
Well, that's why it's so important to be aware of the different types of threats out there.
Which is probably why they call this first section laying the groundwork. From zero to cyber aware. It's all about understanding the risks before you can even begin to, build your defenses.
Absolutely. And it's crucial to remember that these threats have real-world consequences. We're not just talking about some minor inconvenience here. It can mean financial loss, identity theft, damage to your reputation. All of that impacts both individuals and companies.
Right. It's serious stuff. And on a larger scale, they even get into the potential impacts on national security, which is kind of terrifying when you think about it.
For sure. It really hammers home just how crucial cybersecurity is in this day and age.
Yeah, it's not just about protecting our devices and our data anymore. It's about protecting, our entire way of life almost.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've, really established how important cybersecurity is.
Mm.
But where do we even begin? The book dives into this thing called the CIA triad. And no, it's not about, spies and secret agents this time.
Right. Totally different CIA. This is about confidentiality, integrity, and availability, the three core principles of good cybersecurity.
Okay, so confidentiality, that's basically all about keeping sensitive information, well, confidential, right? Like making sure your online banking details or personal messages are only seen by, the people they're meant for.
Exactly. Think of it this way. You wouldn't want just anyone reading your private diary, would you?
No way.
Confidentiality is about making sure that your digital information is just as private and protected as your personal belongings.
Got it. So then what about integrity? What does that mean in this context?
Integrity is about making sure that the information hasn't been tampered with, that it's accurate and trustworthy. Imagine, someone intercepting your online bank transfer and changing the amount you're sending.
Oh, that's terrifying.
Yeah, definitely not good. Integrity is about making sure that what you send and receive online is legit, that it hasn't been messed with.
So if confidentiality is like locking your diary, then integrity is making sure no one's ripped the page out or changed the words you wrote.
Perfect analogy. And last but not least, we have availability.
Availability. Okay, that makes me think of those times when, a website crashes and you can't access it. Is that what we're talking about here?
Yep, that's a prime example. Availability means that the systems and the info are actually accessible to you when you need them. Think about essential stuff like Online banking or those healthcare portals, if they go down, it causes huge problems.
Sure. So that's the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Seems like a solid framework, but how do we actually put these principles into practice?
Well, that's where the whole idea of defense in depth comes in, which the book gets into. Think of it like building a fortress around your digital life.
Fortress, huh? I like the sound of that.
Instead of relying on just one security measure, like, yeah, a strong password is important, don't get me wrong. Defense in depth means creating multiple layers of protection.
So a strong password isn't enough on its own.
It's a great start, but think of it like this. A strong password is like having a really sturdy front door. Great, but what if someone finds an open window somewhere else? You got to secure all the potential entry points.
Okay, so you're saying we need layers of security, just like a fortress has layers of walls and moats. What do those layers actually look like when we're talking about, the digital world?
The book does a good job of breaking it down. So
Uh-huh.
you've got your perimeter defenses, things like firewalls, which basically act as a barrier between your devices and like the rest of the internet, filtering out anything malicious.
Right, I've definitely heard of firewalls, but to be honest, I'm not 100% sure how they actually work.
Imagine them as like security guards for your network. They check out all the incoming and outgoing data and block anything that looks suspicious based on a set of rules you define.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the other layers?
Then you've got security measures for your internal network, things like intrusion detection systems. They're always monitoring for any weird activity and sound the alarm if something seems off.
So it's like having security cameras inside the fortress.
You got it. And lastly, there's security for your actual devices. Things like using those strong passwords we talked about and keeping your antivirus software up to date. That helps protect you from anything that might have slipped through those outer layers.
It's like having this whole defense system in place, so even if one part fails, you've got backups ready to go.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of defense in depth. It makes you a way harder target by shutting down as many vulnerabilities as possible.
This is making me realize I might need to step up my cybersecurity game, honestly.
Yeah.
But even with all these defenses, things can still go wrong, right? Like the book talks about that Equifax breach, which is a pretty scary example.
Oh, yeah. The Equifax breach is like a textbook case of what can happen when even those basic cybersecurity principles get overlooked. And it's something everyone can learn from, even if you're not super techie.
Okay, so for anyone who's not familiar, what exactly went down with Equifax?
So back in 2017, Equifax, which for those who don't know is a credit reporting agency, they hold a ton of sensitive financial data on millions of people. They had this massive data breach. Hackers basically got into their systems and got their hands on social security numbers, birth dates, addresses, all kinds of personal info.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that. It felt like everyone was affected. But how did it even happen in the first place? Like, what went wrong?
The book goes into some of the contributing factors, and it really all ties back to those principles we were just talking about.
So, like, weaknesses in their defense-in-depth strategy.
Exactly. One major issue was outdated software. They were using this older version of a web application framework that had a known vulnerability. And, get this, they knew about it, but they hadn't patched it.
Wait, hold on. They knew about a security flaw and just, didn't fix it? That seems like a pretty basic mistake.
Right. And that's the thing. This wasn't even some super complex attack using all these crazy hacking techniques. It was just a failure to do that basic cybersecurity upkeep.
So they basically left the front door wide open, even though they knew there were, digital burglars roaming around.
Pretty much. And it gets worse. It wasn't just the outdated software. They also didn't have enough network segmentation. That meant once those hackers got into one part of the system, it was easy for them to, jump around and get access to other sensitive stuff.
Oh, so, instead of having your valuables spread out and locked up in different places, they kept everything in one room.
Exactly. And if that wasn't bad enough, their monitoring practices were, well, let's just say, they weren't great. So they didn't even realize a breach had happened until, get this, months later.
Hang on, so they weren't even checking the security cameras in their digital fortress.
Not effectively, no. And obviously, by the time they figured out what had happened, the damage was done. Millions of people's data just out there. It was a huge deal.
Yeah, talk about a hard lesson to learn. But it really drives home the point that layering those security measures, having those multiple defenses in place is absolutely crucial.
100%. The Equifax breach is like a cautionary tale for everyone. It shows that no single security measure, no matter how strong, is foolproof. You got to have the strong passwords, the up-to-date software, firewalls, intrusion detection, the whole 9 yards.
So it's like you hope you never need that safety net, but
Yeah,
you're sure glad it's there if you take a tumble.
exactly. And it's not just about like setting it and forgetting it either. Cybersecurity is an ongoing thing. You have to constantly be checking your systems, making sure software is updated, staying informed about new threats. It's a process.
Not a one-time fix, for sure. It's a journey.
Right. And speaking of journeys, the book takes a pretty deep dive into cryptography, which, I'll be honest, always seemed kind of mysterious to me.
Cryptography, huh? Isn't that all about, like, secret codes and stuff?
It is, but it's not as complicated as it sounds. At its heart, it's about using these mathematical algorithms to basically make information unreadable unless you have the right key to unlock it.
So, kind of like putting a message in one of those lockboxes where only the person with the key can open it.
Exactly. And these lockboxes, they're practically impenetrable. We're talking crazy, complex mathematical formulas that would take even the most powerful computers, like years, maybe even centuries to crack.
Okay, that makes me feel a little better.
Yeah.
But how does cryptography actually work in, like, the real world?
Oh, you've definitely encountered it more than you realize. Think about when you use online banking. When you log in your username and password, that stuff gets encrypted. It's scrambled before it even travels over the internet.
So even if someone intercepts it, they can't actually read it because it's all jumbled up.
Exactly. Only your bank, because they have the right decryption key, can make sense of that information. And it's not just online banking, it's used for emails, online shopping, those VPNs, pretty much anytime you're sending sensitive stuff online.
Like a secret language that only the right people have the code book for.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And speaking of things that sound kind of futuristic, the book then gets into artificial intelligence and its role in cybersecurity.
AI and cybersecurity. Now that sounds like a powerful combination.
It really is. See, AI is really good at analyzing tons and tons of data. And in cybersecurity, that's huge. We're talking about a constant flood of information about potential threats.
So it's like having this, like, superpowered security guard that can scan the entire internet for any suspicious activity.
I like that analogy. AI can spot malware, it can flag those phishing attempts, it can even predict future attacks by looking for patterns in past breaches. Plus, it can handle some of those more routine tasks like vulnerability scanning and incident response. That frees up the human experts to focus on the really complex stuff.
Wow, it sounds like AI has the potential to completely change how we approach cybersecurity.
It definitely does. But it's important to remember, AI is a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or, not so good purposes.
So there are risks involved.
There are always risks. Hackers are definitely using AI too to make their attacks more sophisticated. So it really is that constant arms race like we were talking about before. The key is staying ahead of the curve, constantly learning, adapting those defenses.
Makes sense. So as we wrap up here, what are the big takeaways we should be walking away with from this deep dive?
Well, I think the most important one is that cybersecurity is on everyone. It doesn't matter if you're like a tech expert or just starting out. We all have a responsibility to be proactive about protecting ourselves and our information online.
Couldn't agree more. It's like wearing a seatbelt. You
Huh.
wouldn't get behind the wheel without one, and you shouldn't be browsing the internet without taking those cybersecurity precautions either.
Exactly. And the good news is there are a lot of simple things you can do to be safer online, like using those strong passwords we talked about, turning on that two-factor authentication, and just being really mindful about the links you click and what information you're sharing. It's about awareness and action.
Being aware of the risks, then taking action to, minimize them.
Exactly. And remember, it's a journey. Things are always changing in the cybersecurity landscape, so we have to be ready to change with them. Keep learning, keep adapting.
This deep dive into Cybersecurity 360 has been, honestly, a bit of a wake-up call. I feel like I have a much better grasp on just how complex this all is and how important it is for everyone to be vigilant.
Absolutely. And it's been great chatting about all this with you. Hopefully our listeners are feeling empowered to take control of their own cybersecurity.
Here's hoping. Until next time, everyone, stay safe out there and stay curious.